Some people become experts at hiding their pain, but the people who truly see them never stop noticing the smallest details. The black SUV waited quietly beneath the glowing lights outside Moretti Financial Tower while employees streamed onto the Manhattan sidewalk, eager to escape another long day at the office. Emily Harper adjusted the strap of her worn leather handbag and stepped carefully through the revolving doors, hoping to disappear into the evening crowd before anyone noticed her. She had become remarkably skilled at blending into the background. It was easier that way. Invisible people were rarely asked difficult questions. As she reached the curb, the rear passenger door of the waiting SUV opened before she could take another step. Michael Russo stood beside it with his usual calm expression. "Miss Harper," he said politely, "Mr. Moretti would like a few minutes of your time." Emily's heartbeat quickened. Around her, several employees slowed their pace, pretending not to stare while quietly wondering why the company's mysterious owner had summoned a secretary after business hours. Emily immediately searched her memory for mistakes she might have made. Had she forgotten an important meeting? Sent confidential information to the wrong executive? Misplaced a contract? Nothing came to mind, yet anxiety settled heavily inside her chest. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. Michael simply shook his head. "Mr. Moretti is waiting." With hesitant steps, Emily climbed into the vehicle. The door closed gently behind her, shutting out the sounds of the busy city. Warm lights illuminated the elegant interior, while soft instrumental music played almost too quietly to hear. Vincent Moretti sat across from her, wearing a charcoal overcoat, one hand resting on a closed leather portfolio. His calm blue eyes never left the rain beginning to collect against the tinted window. He was a man whose reputation caused powerful businessmen to choose their words carefully, yet he greeted Emily with nothing more than a respectful nod. "Thank you for coming," he said. Emily lowered her eyes. "Of course, Mr. Moretti." Silence settled inside the vehicle as the driver eased into traffic. Emily folded her hands tightly together, trying to hide how much they trembled. Every second felt longer than the last. She wondered whether she should apologize before learning what had happened. She wondered whether this conversation would end her career before it had truly begun. Vincent watched the reflections of city lights slide across the glass before finally speaking again. "You have worked here for 3 weeks." Emily nodded. "Yes, sir." "You arrive early." Another nod. "You leave late." She quietly answered, "Sometimes there is extra work." Vincent accepted the explanation without comment, but his steady voice carried no accusation. "You complete every assignment before anyone asks about it. You never complain. You never ask for recognition." Emily managed a faint smile. "I am just doing my job." Vincent slowly turned toward her for the first time since the vehicle had pulled away from the building. There was neither anger nor suspicion in his expression, only quiet certainty. "No," he said gently. "You are doing much more than your job." Emily felt her breath catch as uncertainty replaced fear. She could not understand where the conversation was leading. Vincent waited another moment before asking the single question that instantly shattered every excuse she had rehearsed in her mind. "Who taught you to hide your pain so well?" The words hung motionless inside the quiet SUV while the city continued moving outside, and for the first time in a very long time, Emily realized someone had finally seen what she believed she had hidden from the entire world. 3 weeks earlier, Emily Harper walked through the glass entrance of Moretti Financial carrying nothing more than a leather handbag, a neatly organized folder, and the quiet determination to build a better future than the one she had left behind. The towering office overlooked the heart of Manhattan, where polished marble floors reflected the morning sunlight and executives moved with the confidence of people accustomed to success. Emily admired the elegance around her, but she had not come searching for prestige. She had come searching for stability. Her mother's medical treatments in Albany had become increasingly expensive, and every paycheck mattered. She promised herself that no matter how demanding the position became, she would never complain. Before the first week had ended, everyone recognized Emily as the secretary who somehow solved problems before anyone realized they existed. She remembered birthdays, reorganized impossible schedules, corrected small mistakes before they reached executives, and quietly stayed after hours to prepare meeting materials for the following morning. She never raised her voice, never interrupted conversations, and never sought recognition for work that often made everyone else's jobs easier. Most employees appreciated her professionalism, but very few actually noticed her. Emily preferred it that way. Blending into the background felt familiar. Attention had rarely brought anything good into her life. There were small habits she believed nobody could see. Every morning, she checked the building entrance before stepping inside. Whenever the office telephone rang from an unfamiliar number, she stared at the screen for a brief moment before silently declining the call. During lunch breaks, while coworkers laughed together in nearby restaurants, Emily usually remained at her desk, finishing paperwork with soft instrumental music playing through a single earbud. If someone unexpectedly approached from behind, she instinctively looked over her shoulder before forcing a polite smile. Those reactions lasted only seconds, disappearing almost as quickly as they appeared. To everyone else, they seemed meaningless. Vincent Moretti rarely spent entire days inside the executive offices. His responsibilities often carried him across the city, yet whenever he returned, he possessed an unusual ability to notice details others ignored. One afternoon he passed through the reception area, just as a maintenance employee accidentally brushed against Emily's shoulder while carrying several large boxes. The worker apologized immediately. Emily apologized as well. Vincent slowed his pace without saying a word. It was an ordinary accident. What caught his attention was the fact that Emily apologized first. 2 days later, another executive thanked Emily for staying late to reorganize an important presentation. She simply smiled and answered, "It was nothing." Vincent happened to overhear the conversation while leaving a meeting. It was not nothing. The presentation had secured an important client. Still, Emily dismissed her own effort as though it carried no value. By the beginning of the 3rd week, Vincent found himself quietly observing a woman most people believed was almost invisible. She never asked for recognition, never accepted compliments comfortably, and never behaved as though she deserved the kindness others occasionally offered. It was not shyness alone. It felt more like someone who had spent a very long time believing she occupied less space than everyone else. Standing inside his office one evening, Vincent watched employees leave through the lobby below. Among them, Emily walked with her shoulders slightly lowered, her eyes briefly scanning the sidewalk before continuing toward the subway station. She disappeared into the evening crowd within seconds. Most people would have forgotten her almost immediately. Vincent did not. Without fully understanding why, he realized he had begun remembering the smallest details about a woman who seemed determined to make certain nobody remembered her at all. Over the next several days, Emily Harper became a quiet constant inside Moretti Financial, moving through the executive floor with the kind of precision that made complicated days seem effortless. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, unlocked conference rooms, confirmed travel schedules, reviewed executive calendars, and prepared every meeting long before the first director stepped through the elevator doors. She worked with remarkable efficiency, yet she carried herself as though she hoped no one would ever notice. To everyone else, she was simply an excellent secretary. To Vincent Moretti, she was becoming a puzzle made of details that refused to fit together. It began with moments so ordinary that almost anyone else would have ignored them. During one executive meeting, an unexpected joke caused the room to erupt with laughter. Emily smiled politely, but her attention drifted toward the conference room door instead of joining the conversation. Every few minutes, almost without realizing it, she glanced toward the hallway as though expecting someone to appear. The behavior lasted only a second before she returned to taking notes with flawless concentration. Vincent noticed every glance. 2 mornings later, Emily entered the executive floor carrying fresh coffee for a visiting client. As she reached the reception desk, another assistant accidentally brushed against her sleeve while reaching for a folder. Emily instinctively stepped backward before offering a quick apology, even though the accident had clearly not been her fault. Her smile appeared almost immediately afterward, carefully replacing the brief flash of uneasiness that crossed her face. The other assistant continued working without another thought. Vincent, who had just stepped out of the elevator, quietly watched the entire exchange before walking toward his office without saying a word. That afternoon, Emily's cellular telephone vibrated twice while she organized documents outside the executive conference room. She looked down at the screen, and the warmth disappeared from her expression almost instantly. Without answering, she locked the phone, placed it inside her handbag, and slowly exhaled before returning to work. Less than 5 minutes later, the telephone vibrated again. Once more she ignored it. Vincent happened to pass by on his way to another meeting. He did not ask who had called. He simply remembered that Emily never ignored work-related calls. Whatever appeared on that screen belonged to a different part of her life. By the end of the week, another quiet pattern emerged. Although Emily's assignments were usually completed before 5 o'clock, security staff repeatedly saw her remain inside the building until nearly 7. She spent those extra hours reorganizing files that were already organized, checking calendars that had already been confirmed, or reviewing documents that required no additional attention. She never submitted overtime requests. She simply waited before finally leaving for the evening. Standing inside his office overlooking Midtown Manhattan, Vincent slowly began connecting each observation. The long sleeves despite warm weather, the instinctive apologies, the unanswered calls, the constant awareness of every doorway, the unnecessary hours spent inside the safest building she visited each day. None of those details proved anything on their own. Together, however, they told a story that paperwork never could. Late Friday evening, Michael Russo entered Vincent's office after receiving a brief message. He quietly closed the door behind him, waiting for instructions. Vincent remained standing beside the window, watching Emily disappear into the crowd several stories below. After a thoughtful silence, he spoke without turning around. "Find out everything you can about Miss Harper." Michael nodded once. "Business or personal?" Vincent's answer came without hesitation. Only enough to understand why someone who has done nothing wrong spends every day living as though she is waiting for something she cannot escape. Monday morning began with the steady rhythm of polished shoes crossing marble floors, elevator doors opening every few seconds, and quiet conversations echoing through the executive level of Moretti Financial. Emily Harper moved through the familiar routine with practiced precision, reviewing meeting agendas, arranging presentation materials, and confirming travel schedules before most executives had even arrived. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary, yet Vincent Moretti could no longer look at her without remembering the countless small details that refused to leave his mind. Whatever burden she carried, she had become remarkably skilled at making it invisible. Late that afternoon, the executive board gathered for a quarterly strategy meeting that stretched well beyond its scheduled ending. Financial projections covered the large display screens while department heads debated expansion plans across several states. Emily remained near the conference table, quietly replacing empty water glasses, distributing revised reports, and making certain every request was answered before anyone needed to ask twice. Nearly 3 hours later, the meeting finally concluded. Executives collected their briefcases and drifted into the hallway, continuing conversations about contracts and investments as the conference room slowly emptied. Emily stayed behind as she always did. She believed every room should look exactly as it had before the meeting began. She gathered notebooks, aligned chairs beneath the polished table, and reached down to retrieve a silver pen that had rolled beneath one of the leather seats. As she bent forward, the cuff of her blouse slipped several inches above her wrist. For the briefest moment, a fading yellow and purple bruise became visible against her fair skin before she instinctively pulled the sleeve back into place. She believed she was alone. She was not. Vincent had quietly returned to collect a document he had forgotten beside his chair. Standing just inside the doorway, he saw the bruise before Emily realized her sleeve had moved. Neither of them spoke. Emily finished straightening the chairs and turned toward the exit, only then noticing Vincent watching from the doorway. Her expression changed immediately. "I am sorry, Mr. Moretti," she said softly. "I should have finished sooner." Vincent glanced around the spotless conference room. Every chair was perfectly aligned. Every folder had been stacked with careful precision. There was nothing left for anyone else to do. "There is nothing to apologize for," he replied calmly. Emily offered a polite nod before leaving the room. Never realizing that Vincent's attention had remained fixed on the sleeve she had hurriedly adjusted. After she disappeared into the hallway, Vincent remained alone inside the silent conference room for several moments. He replayed everything he had observed during the past 3 weeks. The instinctive apologies, the unanswered telephone calls, the unnecessary hours spent inside the office, the constant awareness of every doorway. Now there was one more piece of the puzzle. Late that evening, Michael Russo entered Vincent's office carrying a slim folder. Vincent looked up from the city lights beyond the window. Tell me what you found. Michael opened the report. Miss Harper has an excellent employment record. Every reference describes her as dependable and honest. There are no financial problems beyond helping support her mother's medical care. No criminal history. No workplace complaints. Vincent listened without interrupting. Anything else? Michael nodded. She regularly receives calls from several unidentified numbers, but almost never answers them. Security records also confirm she remains inside this building long after her work is finished, even though she does not request overtime. Vincent slowly closed the folder without reading another page. He already understood what the paperwork could never explain. Some truths did not hide inside reports. They hid inside the quiet moments when a person believed nobody was watching. The report remained on Vincent Moretti's desk long after Michael Russo had quietly left the office. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath thousands of lights, while traffic drifted through the streets far below like slow-moving rivers of gold. Vincent had spent years building an empire by trusting facts instead of assumptions, yet every page inside the folder confirmed only one thing. Emily Harper's life made perfect sense on paper. It was everything between the lines that refused to be explained. The following morning, Michael returned carrying several additional documents gathered over the weekend. Vincent motioned for him to sit. Anything new? Michael opened the folder with the same careful professionalism he brought to every assignment. Nothing that changes who she is, he answered. Former employers all describe her the same way. Dependable, honest, quiet. One manager even wrote that she routinely helped co-workers finish projects without ever asking for recognition. Vincent listened without interrupting. Michael continued. Her financial records are exactly what we expected. Rent is always paid on time. There are no unusual purchases, no unexplained debts, and no hidden accounts. Most of her disposable income goes toward helping cover her mother's medical care in Albany. Vincent slowly nodded. Every new detail reinforced the same picture. Emily was not hiding a dishonest life. She was protecting something else entirely. Michael turned. Another page. There is one pattern worth mentioning. Vincent looked up. Go on. Security records confirm she remains inside the building nearly every evening for at least 90 minutes after finishing her work. Cleaning staff have become accustomed to seeing her reorganizing files that are already organized or reviewing schedules that have already been finalized. Vincent rested his hands together. Does she claim overtime? Never. The answer lingered between them. Michael continued carefully. We also reviewed the telephone records connected to the unidentified numbers. The calls usually begin shortly after business hours end. Some evenings there are 6 or 7 attempts within a single hour. She almost never answers. Vincent remained silent. Reports could explain financial habits. They could identify employment history. They could even reveal communication patterns. None of them could explain why a capable young woman deliberately delayed going home every night or why every unfamiliar telephone call erased the warmth from her face. Michael closed the folder. If you would like, I can continue digging deeper. Vincent looked toward the city beyond the glass before quietly shaking his head. No. Michael appeared slightly surprised. You believe we have enough? Vincent answered without hesitation. We have enough to know she deserves respect. We do not have enough to earn the rest of her story. The room became still. After several thoughtful seconds, Vincent stood and buttoned his charcoal jacket. There is a difference between protecting someone and invading their privacy. Michael understood immediately. Vincent had reached the limit of what he considered acceptable. Whatever truth remained hidden would have to be offered freely or not at all. As Vincent picked up his car keys from the corner of the desk, he made a decision that carried far more weight than another investigation ever could. Tomorrow evening, when Emily finished work and believed she was leaving unnoticed once again, he would ask her one simple question face to face. Not as the owner of the company, not as the most feared man in the room, but as the first person willing to let her decide whether she was finally ready to stop carrying every burden completely alone. The quiet hum of the engine blended with the soft rhythm of rain striking the windows as the black SUV moved steadily through the evening streets of Manhattan. Emily Harper remained perfectly still, her hands resting tightly around her handbag, while Vincent Moretti waited with the patience of a man who had learned that silence often revealed more than questions ever could. His words continued echoing inside her mind. Who taught you to hide your pain so well? She searched for an answer that would end the conversation without revealing anything, but every explanation sounded empty before she even spoke it. Finally, she forced a faint smile that never reached her eyes. I think you may have misunderstood me, Mr. Moretti, she said quietly. Everything is fine. Vincent did not challenge her. He simply looked through the rain-covered glass as the lights of passing buildings reflected across the interior of the vehicle. After several moments he spoke again, his voice calm and steady. You arrived before everyone else. Emily remained silent. You stay long after your work is finished. She lowered her eyes. You apologize for accidents that are not your fault. You avoid unfamiliar telephone calls. You look toward every doorway before you enter a room. And when your sleeve slipped during the meeting yesterday, you try to hide it before anyone could notice. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. She had spent months believing those moments were too small for anyone to remember. Somehow, he had remembered all of them. She slowly looked up. Why would you pay attention to someone like me? Vincent answered without hesitation. Because people who spend their lives protecting everyone else often become invisible to those around them. The words settled between them more heavily than any accusation could have. Emily looked down once again, struggling to keep her emotions hidden behind the same quiet smile she wore every day at work. You do not know anything about my life, she whispered. Vincent nodded gently. You are right. He paused before continuing. That is why I am asking instead of assuming. The vehicle stopped beneath the covered entrance of an elegant medical office on the Upper East Side. Warm lights glowed behind the windows while the rain continued falling across the empty sidewalk. Emily looked outside before turning back toward Vincent with visible confusion. Why are we here? She asked. Because I would like someone to make certain you are healthy. Emily immediately shook her head. I cannot afford a place like this. Vincent's expression never changed. You are not being asked to. She looked away again. I should not accept something so generous. Vincent leaned forward slightly, his voice remaining as calm as it had been since the conversation began. This is not charity. This is concern. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment. No one had spoken to her that way in a very long time. There was no pressure in his voice, no expectation, no attempt to control her decisions. He had simply offered help without asking for anything in return. Vincent quietly opened the vehicle door before looking back at her. If you decide to walk away, I will respect that choice. If you decide to step inside, nobody in that building will ask questions you are not ready to answer. Emily looked toward the softly lit entrance once more. For months, she had convinced herself that surviving alone was the only option she deserved. Now, for the first time, someone had offered her a different possibility. With a slow, unsteady breath, she released her grip on the handbag, stepped out of the vehicle, and walked toward the entrance. Not because her fears had disappeared, but because she had finally met someone who understood that healing always begins with feeling safe enough to take the very first step. The examination ended quietly, without urgency or alarm, and the physician returned to the consultation room carrying a slim folder before taking a seat across from Emily Harper and Vincent Moretti. His expression remained calm and reassuring as he reviewed the results. The good news, he began gently, is that there are no injuries requiring emergency treatment. What I am more concerned about is how long you have ignored your own well-being. Emily lowered her eyes, folding her hands together as though hoping the conversation might somehow disappear. The physician continued, explaining that several bruises were already healing but that prolonged stress, poor sleep, and constant anxiety were taking a visible toll on her health. He recommended regular follow-up appointments, counseling, proper rest, and enough time away from unnecessary pressure to allow both her body and mind to recover. Emily quietly thanked him before he excused himself, leaving the room wrapped in a thoughtful silence broken only by the gentle sound of rain tapping against the windows. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Vincent never rushed her. He simply waited with the same patience that had carried him through every conversation since she entered the vehicle. Finally, Emily released a slow breath she seemed to have been holding for months. I used to think I was a confident person, she said softly. Then little by little I stopped recognizing myself. Vincent remained silent, giving her the space to continue. Emily looked toward the rain-covered window instead of meeting his eyes. The relationship did not become unhealthy overnight. At first, everything felt normal. Then every decision I made seemed to become another reason for disappointment. If I worked late, I was told I cared more about my career than the people in my life. If I spent weekends visiting my mother in Albany, I was told I was choosing everyone else first. Every conversation somehow ended with me apologizing. She paused, struggling to steady her voice. After a while, I started believing I really was the problem. I questioned everything I said. I questioned every decision. Even when nothing was wrong, I felt guilty. Vincent listened without interruption. There was no judgment in his expression, only quiet understanding. Emily continued. Eventually, I ended the relationship, but the telephone calls kept coming. I stopped answering, yet I was always afraid another call would appear. That is why I stayed late at the office. It felt like the safest place I knew. A tear quietly escaped before she brushed it away. I never told my mother because she has already been through enough with her treatments. I wanted her to believe I was doing well. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, everything would eventually fix itself. Vincent looked at her for several seconds before speaking. You carried every burden alone because you believed protecting other people mattered more than protecting yourself. Emily slowly nodded. Hearing someone else describe her life with such simple honesty made the truth impossible to deny. Vincent leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but unwavering. You were never weak for asking too little from the people around you. You simply spent too much time believing you had to earn the right to be treated with kindness. Emily looked at him for the first time since entering the consultation room. There was no pity in his eyes, no expectation, and no attempt to rescue her from her past. There was only respect. In that quiet moment, she realized something she had forgotten long ago. The strongest people are not always the ones who carry every burden alone. Sometimes they are the ones who finally allow themselves to believe they deserve help. And for the first time in many months, Emily felt that possibility becoming real. When Emily Harper returned to Moretti Financial the following Monday morning, nothing on the executive floor appeared different. The marble lobby reflected the early sunlight. Elevators opened with their familiar quiet chime, and employees hurried toward another busy week carrying coffee cups and tablet computers. Yet everything felt different to Emily. For the first time in months, she walked through the revolving doors without pausing to study every face around her. The fear had not disappeared overnight, but it no longer controlled every step she took. She arrived at her desk to find a handwritten note asking her to stop by Vincent Moretti's office whenever she had a free moment. There was no urgency, only a simple invitation. Emily quietly organized the morning schedule before knocking gently on the office door. Vincent looked up from several financial reports and motioned toward the chair across from his desk. Good morning, Miss Harper. Good morning, Mr. Moretti. He slid a neatly organized folder across the polished desk without saying another word. Emily opened it carefully. Inside, she found the contact information for the physician she had already met, a licensed counselor who specialized in helping people rebuild confidence after emotionally difficult experiences, and an attorney whose practice focused on personal safety and legal protection should she ever need professional guidance. Beneath those documents rested the information for a furnished apartment located only a few blocks from the office in a secure building with 24-hour staff. Emily looked up almost immediately. I cannot accept something like this. Vincent remained calm. You are not required to accept any of it. She looked back at the folder. Then why prepare all of this? Vincent answered with complete sincerity. Because people heal more easily when they no longer spend every day worrying about where they will feel safe. Emily struggled to respond. Throughout her life, she had become accustomed to solving every problem alone, believing that accepting help meant becoming a burden. Vincent seemed to understand that without needing an explanation. Your work schedule has also changed, he continued. For the next several weeks, you will leave the office no later than 5 o'clock. Any medical appointments or counseling sessions will be treated as part of your regular workday. Your salary will remain exactly the same. Emily stared at him in disbelief. You are trusting me with all of this? Vincent slowly nodded. I am trusting the person you have already shown yourself to be. Those words settled deeply inside her. He had not offered these opportunities because he felt sorry for her. He had offered them because he respected the woman she had quietly proven herself to be every single day. During the weeks that followed, Change came gradually instead of all at once. Emily moved into the new apartment and slept peacefully through the night for the first time in many months. She attended every counseling appointment, discovering that healing was not about pretending the past had never happened, but about refusing to let it define every tomorrow. She visited her mother in Albany more often, smiling with genuine confidence instead of carefully hiding her exhaustion behind polite conversation. At the office, coworkers began noticing subtle differences. Emily laughed more naturally during lunch, accepted compliments without immediately apologizing, and no longer hurried to erase herself from every conversation. One evening, Michael Russo stood beside Vincent as employees made their way through the lobby below. Watching Emily leave the building with relaxed shoulders and an unhurried smile, Michael quietly observed, "She looks like a different person." Vincent watched her disappear into the warm evening sunlight before answering, "No, she finally looks like the person fear convinced her she could never be, and now she is remembering who she has been all along." 3 months passed with the quiet certainty that real healing rarely announced itself all at once. Instead, it appeared in ordinary moments that most people never noticed. Emily Harper no longer hurried through the lobby with her eyes fixed on the floor. She greeted coworkers with genuine warmth, accepted compliments without immediately apologizing, and carried herself with a confidence that came not from perfection, but from finally believing she deserved to stand where she was. On a crisp autumn morning, the executive conference room filled with investors, attorneys, and senior executives preparing for one of the most significant partnership meetings in the company's history. Every seat around the polished table was occupied. Presentation screens displayed financial projections, and conversations echoed with the anticipation that always accompanied decisions worth millions of dollars. Emily moved through the room with calm precision, confirming attendance, adjusting schedules when a delayed flight threatened the morning agenda, coordinating communications between departments, and solving unexpected problems before they reached the executives. Months earlier, she would have questioned every decision she made. Now she trusted her own judgment without hesitation. When one presentation file unexpectedly failed to load moments before the meeting began, Emily calmly redirected the order of speakers, retrieved a secure backup copy from the company's internal system, and restored the presentation before anyone outside the executive team realized there had been a problem. Several visiting partners exchanged impressed glances, quietly acknowledging the remarkable professionalism displayed by the young secretary. As the meeting concluded successfully, one of the senior investors approached Vincent Moretti while employees gathered documents around the room. "Your company has exceptional leadership," he said before glancing toward Emily. "That young woman runs this floor with remarkable confidence." Vincent looked across the room as Emily answered a question from another executive with quiet assurance. A small smile appeared before disappearing just as quickly. "She always had that ability," he replied. "She simply needed the chance to believe it herself." Later that afternoon, after the visitors had departed and the executive offices settled into their usual peaceful rhythm, Emily gently knocked on Vincent's open office door. She carried a small envelope in her hand. "May I come in?" she asked. Vincent nodded. "Of course." Emily placed the envelope on his desk before taking a slow breath. "I wanted to thank you." Vincent looked at the envelope but did not reach for it. "You do not owe me anything." Emily smiled softly. "Maybe not, but there is something you deserve to know." She met his eyes with complete confidence, something she could never have imagined doing only a few months earlier. "You were the first person who noticed I was struggling without making me feel ashamed. You never treated me like someone who needed to be rescued. You treated me like someone worth respecting." Vincent remained silent, allowing her words to settle naturally between them. After a thoughtful moment, he answered quietly, "The strength was always yours. I only refused to ignore it." Emily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She left the office with steady, unhurried steps, walking through the executive floor where colleagues greeted her with genuine respect earned through character rather than sympathy. Vincent finally opened the envelope and found a handwritten note expressing gratitude not for changing her life, but for reminding her that it still belonged to her. As evening settled over Manhattan and the lights beyond the office windows slowly illuminated the skyline, Vincent watched employees leave for home, including the quiet secretary who no longer tried to disappear into the crowd. She walked forward without looking over her shoulder because fear no longer decided the direction of her life. And from that day forward, nobody remembered the woman who hid her pain. They remembered the woman who refused to let it define who she would become.